On behalf of all of St. Cloud Pride, we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for our virtual panel on allyship within the LGBTQA+ community. I'm Kristen Peterson. I'm a member of St. Cloud Pride, and I serve as the board treasurer. My co-moderator for the evening is the lovely Taryn Gentile. She's also a board member and serves as the board secretary. So we're really looking forward to guiding you all tonight through this discussion. So just a few Zoom logistics. Some of you have already heard me say it. This is our second webinar ever, first one being yesterday, so bear with us. All of the attendees are muted, but the chat and the Q&A feature is active and it's being monitored by Cody, who is our board co-chair. We will be having the Q&A session at the end and we'll answer all of your questions at that time, so please go ahead and use that Q&A area to put your questions. If you do need closed captioning, you can click on the red live button in your upper left corner on the Zoom screen and go to closed captioning streaming service. So St. Cloud Pride, last year we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. Now, although we're called St. Cloud Pride, we do want to make it clear that we really aim to serve all of central Minnesota. And you can see on the screen right now is our mission. The mission is to contribute to the educational awareness of the LGBTQA+ people in our community, to provide a forum for the discussion and organization of activities, programs, and education for LGBTQA+ people in our community, and to provide a safe event during the year to celebrate the LGBTQA+ within our community. And those pictures are just a couple of our things that we've done before. So annually, we host Pride in the Park on the third Saturday in September. That's probably what many of you guys are familiar with. In 2019, since it was our 10-year anniversary, we expanded this event to encompass various activities throughout the week in the community. Outside of Pride Week, we've also hosted drag brunch, parks cleanup, educational panels like tonight's, and queer trivia at our local cidery, just to name a few things we've done. This year's Pride Week is almost all virtual due to the pandemic. Unfortunately, but also fortunate because I'm sure we have some people viewing tonight that would otherwise not be able to join us. Our sponsors and our supporters in the community have really stepped up to help make it a great week. If you visit our Facebook page, you can find the Pet Digital Costume Contest. Postings end tonight, so get a picture on there of your pet in any kind of costume, whether it be Pride, just a costume, or the COVID category. There's some really cute pups on there now, and a frog. You can also visit our Facebook events for the Digital Pride Parade going on all week, which shows the businesses in our areas that are supporting us. Tomorrow night, we have a digital dance party hosted by the one and only DJ Pleasa, which will be streaming on Twitch. Saturday, we are doing our second local parks cleanup of the year. You can visit the Facebook event to sign up for the park and the shift that you'd like to do. We're also hosting our first ever digital drag show, which will also be streamed on Twitch. And let me tell you, this is one you do not want to miss. I've seen some of the previews and it is pretty phenomenal. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Taryn now to introduce our panel topic and each of tonight's panelists.
Tonight's panel topic is how to be a good ally. For many of us, we want to support our LGBTQA+ and BIPOC brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings in our community, but we're not really sure how. How can we move past being a performative ally and be someone that actually is a true ally to the community? And hopefully we're going to get some great perspectives tonight from our panelists. The first panelist is Pastor Yolanda Denson Byers. Pastor Byers serves the Ministry of Faith Lutheran Church in Becker. She was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and educated at Wesleyan University, Harvard University, and Luther Seminary. Pastor Yolanda has over 20 years in ministry and calls herself a child of God, wife, mother, pastor, friend, fellow agitator. So thank you for coming, Pastor Yolanda. Our next panelist is George Froehle, PAC. He grew up in St. Cloud and attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison for his undergraduate degree. He worked in LGBTQ health for numerous years in Seattle, New York City, and now St. Cloud. George believes in a patient-centered philosophy of care free from any judgments with an emphasis on patient education. And we thank you, George, again for joining us this evening. We also have Tygra Slarii. They are a fierce, multifaceted talent. Best known as a crowd favorite for their moves at many local drag venues, Their impact reaches far past the stage. As an Afro-Black, trans, non-binary, adoptee, and sexual assault survivor, they use their life experiences to make the world a more inclusive place. Tygra left a career in the medical field to make a tangible difference in the world. They work in the community for anti-racism for the trans and queer community. They are a social justice dialogue facilitator, community advocate, and a mentor to many queer and trans youth. They focus on commonizing the understanding of the trans community and get them into spaces and conversations that the trans community is excluded from. So thank you again, Tygra, for joining us tonight.
And we did have one panelist that, if you saw it on the Facebook event, we were going to have one more panelist, Cortez Riley, unfortunately could not make it due to a family emergency. So that is why you will not see him on this evening. All right, we're gonna take the slides off now and just go to a panel of all of our faces. And we're gonna get into the questions. So, and I am gonna read these if you see paper over here. So first question for the panel, and Pastor Yolanda, once I'm done, I'm gonna turn it to you for this first one. When talking with a member of the LGBTQ plus community who is coming out, what are some good things for an ally to say or do? Pastor Yolanda?
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today and very grateful for St. Cloud Pride. You know, when I'm talking to an ally, one of the most important things that I share is just the importance of normalizing our experience as LGBTQIA plus people. One of my best stories about that is when I came to my church that I'm currently serving at, there was a youth in the program who was very clearly on our spectrum. And her father came into my office. It was actually her grandfather. And he sat down and he said, I want you to know that I'm not going to let anyone mistreat my granddaughter. She's a child of God and she deserves to be here. And he didn't know that I was, he didn't know that I was a whole lesbian married to a woman. And I just loved it because he treated his grandchild exactly like you would treat a grandchild. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. And since that moment, she has now blessed us by coming out as transgender, by using they, them pronouns, and for really just glowing, you know, and basking in the acceptance of her family and her church family and their church family. And this is something that I'm just learning. So it's just really exciting to see the transformation that has occurred in them. And I think that that transformation can happen for all of us when our allies just believe us and receive us and treat us as they would any other friend, daughter, granddaughter, son, coworker, child of God. So for me, that's really important, and that's information that I always try to share.
Thank you. I just wrote down, believe us and receive us. I think that was just like a really powerful short statement that really sums it all up. So thank you for that. I like that you said normalizing. You know, I had made some notes on kind of, you know, as an ally, what my thoughts on this topic. And one of the questions I was going to pose to you guys, and George and Tygra, you can probably jump in on this too. You know, when somebody comes out to you, do you make it a big deal and make it exciting? Or do you just normalize it? Do you just be casual and say, like, I didn't have to come out as a straight person and it was never a big deal, so do we normalize it? So, George, I'm going to turn it to you now to answer the question, but maybe part of that normalizing too would be interesting.
Yeah, so I struggle with like being a queer person, but also like being in a medical world where I'm trained to like ask questions and answer questions all day long. And so often my approach is to turn it back to the person asking. Somebody's coming out to me and saying, you know, hey, this is what's going on. I often will ask, well, how is that for you, to get an understanding of where they're at in their process. Hi,
I think
sorry.
that's okay. I think I lost you for a second. Are you back, George?
I'm back. Yeah, sorry.
That's
Maybe
okay. That's okay.
my internet, I don't think is very strong tonight. Um, so I was just saying that basically for me, when people come out, it's a wide spectrum of how that process is for them. For some people, coming out is a big celebration. It's something that they've been wanting to do for years and years and years, and they're super excited, and this is a very freeing and joyful act. For other people, it can be a very scary act. You know, they may have a feeling that their family members may not be too supportive of them, and they may be needing some additional support. But I think as an ally, it's important to not assume what's going on. I think we sometimes assume that coming out is a huge challenge, where for some people it's a huge celebration. And so asking the person who's coming out, like, well, how is it going for you? Is there anything I can do to help support you in your process? You know, because you may hear, oh my gosh, I've been waiting 17 years for this and I'm finally out and this is amazing. And all I need you to do is be my friend and take me out into a queer space and show me around and be my support system. Having a really hard time and I actually need a place to stay tonight because I'm not sure where I'm going to go. But I think that assumption is really good. And I think as like a queer person, I had a really big misunderstanding about how people in my life were going to take me coming out. Like when I came out to my dad, I fully expected it to be like a very negative situation. And it wasn't at all. And I was completely surprised. But we spend so many years thinking about what this is going to be like. Is it going to be a good experience, a bad experience? What's it going to be? And then when we finally do it, we don't really have the control over how people are going to receive the information we give. And so and we never stop coming out, right? Like we come out every single day, every new job, every new person we meet, we're constantly coming out. And so part of being a good ally in the coming out process is sort of understanding that, you know, if your buddy who you've known forever as an out and proud queer person is starting a new job, a really great way is like, how do you think this is going to go at your new work? What is your plan? Is there anything I can do to help support you? Those things are really important because in workplaces, especially, we can often feel a little on the outside of some of the more heteronormative social aspects that happen, like after work happy hours or like getting together to watch sporting events, which is kind of a common thing. And so just being a constant ally, knowing that the coming out process never sort of ends.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I've almost filled up my whole page with notes already. You guys are awesome. I love that you said, you know, ask, where are you? Because that's key for us allies. Like you're right. It could be a challenge or it could be a celebration. And we can't make that assumption that everybody goes through the same. So thank you for that. Tygra, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I definitely agree with Pastor Yolanda and George. I guess something I would say is try not to convert the narrative about yourself as an ally. A lot of times when people are coming out, mostly our straight cis allies will take it upon themselves to only say how it affects them and bring themselves into the conversation when that isn't needed. You know, when support is needed, where understanding is needed, where an actual companion is needed. I've seen that happen multiple times within our community, and I have to agree with George, like we do continue to come out on an everyday basis. Some of us continue to go through overlapping coming out stories. Like I would say that for myself, like, you know, I came out as first as a gay man, and then I came out as transgendered, and then I came out as non-binary. And this is a learning experience. So it's very helpful for an ally to try not to steer the conversation to how it benefits you, steer the conversation of how it benefits the person who's actually undergoing a very life-changing moment, because that creates an actual conversation for, if I'm hurt, you're going to understand that I'm hurt. And then if you've never dealt with this before, the next conversation you have, you'll have a better intuition of what to do and how to say it and how to articulate what a story like mine is. Versus if you approach it from, well, I knew you were gay all this time. and I just was waiting for you to come out. And I'm so happy that you're out because now I have a gay best friend. That does nothing but stop the process. That does nothing but let me know that there are red flags here. You weren't listening. It's all about you. And now I don't have a friend, and now I might sink into some type of depression or not come out again, or may not feel comfortable talking to anyone else about this.
Thank you. And I think for those people, everybody listening, you know, what you just said, it, you know, well, I always knew you were gay, you know, that comment. I mean, each of you has probably heard that. So I think that's another good one to touch on for everybody out there listening, that's probably not a good thing for an ally to say, not the way to, because again, that kind of steers the conversation back to my feelings as an ally or my thoughts as an ally and away from what you're trying to tell me. Is that kind of, right?
Yeah, like what George said is just kind of like, I always get stuck on my words. But pretty much just say like, you know, just not to stir the conversation. It's like, even if you think you know, assuming puts you in a position to make not only an ass of you, but of me.
Yes.
I think that's what I was getting. There we go. That's what I was getting.
Yeah. And those kind of conversations about like, oh, I knew a long time ago, those conversations can happen, but maybe not at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe a couple months from now when you're hanging out. But when somebody's really brought up the courage to finally do it, the conversation should really be about that person and their journey.
Okay. Okay. Good information. Okay. Taryn, you want to take question 2?
I will. And Tygra, we're going to turn it to you first for this one. So we're going to go in the reverse order. Obviously, right now, our world is changing really, really fast. And a lot of different things are happening in our world. And we're able to participate in these conversations and these new things that are happening. But how can how can an ally be speaking up against homophobic, transphobic comments without minimizing the voices of the queer community that needs to be heard and needs to be validated? How can we support without overtaking it and like Tygra said, making it about ourselves?
Ooh, that's a I honestly don't believe there's actually a right answer to that, and that's just speaking for myself. I don't think there's a right answer to that because we have conversations every single day. So it comes along with normalizing how you see yourself in the situation. And it's okay to ask questions, even if you may have said something wrong. You know, and as someone like me who has conversations about my body, my autonomy, and all that great things all the time, I would never want someone to speak for me in a way that they know how it affects me. So like, just because I'm a trans non-binary person and I share my story visibly, you can't read my story and then articulate it to someone else so that they can actually heartfelt, wholeheartedly understand what this life is like. I'm puzzled on that one. I'm really puzzled on that one. And I read that. I know you sent us this question, and I was like trying to really think of an articulate way of saying that when you involve yourself in conversations, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to ask questions. It is okay to not have the full definition or like the full scope of what's going on. And if you decide to ask someone a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, do it in a way that if you don't know, let them help you, let them guide you, because that will lead to positivity or a positive comeback. But also, with that being said, if you're talking to a wall and a wall's just not going to listen to you, shut that door. Not every battle can be won. Not every battle can be broken down. Not every wall is meant to be broken down. Some of these conversations were meant to happen as a part of history so that when we look back, we can see, okay, they messed up here. Now that's our roadmap to get to point Z. So I think that's my answer, and I'm going to stick with that.
I like that a lot, Tygra. I especially like kind of getting permission to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of people sometimes feel like if they're not doing the exact right thing, then it's not going to be welcomed. And I really think that's important, that it's okay for us to make mistakes as long as we're willing to learn from them. And I think that's really great.
I think cancel the cancel culture thing, especially around this, like, you know, popular topics around, you know, trans identified bodies, homophobia, racism, such and such, all the isms and everything, like in the institutions. Like, cancel culture makes it very hard for people to want to speak up, to not be wrong. So they try to come to the table already with a prepared outline of maybe a little bit of research that they did, when we all know that Wikipedia is not the great source out there. So just ask, just ask. There's not a dumb question in the world, I promise.
Thank you. George, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think I've had friends stand up for me like throughout my lifetime, right? I used to play on a predominantly gay rugby team in a straight league, you know, and there was a lot of homophobia that took place there, and we had straight players who would kind of like stand up for us, etc. And sometimes that was appreciated, and when it was appreciated by me, I appreciated it because the person that was standing up for me, or for us, they were personally upset with what the person had said. They weren't upset that it might offend me. They were offended, right? And so they were speaking from their heart about why that upset them. Times when somebody would speak up for me saying like, I'm worried that upset George. If I'm upset, I will either let you know or I'll remove myself from the situation. I think it's really important to stand up when you're upset. And that's for things that are like really visibly apparent, right? Because there are like, I mean, I know that I've been a victim of some very homophobic, gay bashing things in my lifetime, and those things are very obvious of what's going on. But then there's the subtle discriminatory things that happen to us in work meetings and workplaces or out on the street. And those things are the much more complicated, nuanced things. But I think if you're an ally at all times. So if there's not an out LGBTQ person in the room and you hear something that you don't think is appropriate, or you hear a policy being made that's not inclusive, those are the times that it's really important to stand up, because there's not an LGBTQ person in the room to stand up for our community. So, you know, as straight people, you have a little bit more power in society than some folks who are on the margin. And so if you have the opportunity to use that power in society for good and betterment, those are the opportunities to really step up. And I think, like you said about making mistakes, it takes practice. It's uncomfortable, but I think the more that you do it, the more that you learn the politics of it, kind of the better.
That's really great, George. I like thinking about being an ally at all times. I think that that really helps put into perspective that you're not just an ally just because you have someone standing next to you who is hurting. It's because you are offended, you are hurting too. And I think that's important that we really think about when we're looking at allyship, that we're taking into consideration that it's not that even if there's no one who is a member of the queer community in the room, like you said, that we're still standing up and being that strong ally. I really like that perspective. Pastor Yolanda, what do you think?
The way I hear you asking the question, what I understand you to be asking is, how can an ally be helpful without being performative and without hijacking the narrative? And this is, as someone with a quite holy triumvirate, I am female, Black, and queer. It is something I think about a lot, because in particular, you know, we in this current milieu, we are very aware of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're learning some important things about how to be an ally to anybody on the margins. And so some of the things that we're learning is that while I 100% agree with Tygra about Wikipedia should not be your only source, we do have beautiful LGBTQIA++, writers, academics, scholars, poets, dancers, performers, artists who have done wonderful and beautiful work that can educate our allies in some ways. And that's not to say you can come to the table feeling like you've now arrived, you understand our experience, but it is to say that there are some things that you as an ally can do to educate yourself. And I don't have to explain that to you every single time. Additionally, I think, another thing that we have learned from the Black Lives Matters movement about allyship is that we have noticed some performative allyship. So, some of our allies want to throw money at the problem and say, I did my part, or they want to show up for a week and distribute food, but they won't speak up in the room when there's, an opportunity, as George stated. And that performative allyship is not helpful to the community because we don't know when we can count on you. And so what we really need is people who, as George said, are offended for offense sake. So I've been doing a lot of talk about racism, and I've been saying that until white people think that racism is a problem and that it's not my problem, it's y'all's problem, it's not going to get fixed. That's something that white people have to do. And in the same way, until our, cisgender, heterosexual folks, allies, feel like homophobia, transphobia, etc. phobia is a problem of society that we just cannot tolerate because it diminishes all of us, then it's not going to change. And so, I really do encourage people who are allies to really think about the ways that you are an ally 24/7, 365, that you are consistent in your message, and that you learn how to say, with all due respect, I hear your opinion and I have a different one. And then consistently speak up for what you know is right. And I have an absolutely ride or die friend. She is European American, she's female, and she's queer. And I trust her with my life because every single time, there's an opportunity to speak up for persons of color, she does it. That's when I know you're my ally.
That's great. Thank you, Yolanda. That's a really, really awesome way to encourage us as allies to take responsibility for our own education as well, and not just rely on the community to educate us all the time, that we need to take responsibility and make efforts to learn more and to be educated as well. I like that perspective too. All right, Kristen, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Third question. How can members of the LGBTQ plus community be better allies to other marginalized groups within the LGBTQ plus community? And we're going to go ahead and start with you on this one, Tygra.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. I can't speak as a person of like looking into this. I have to speak for myself on this one. I want allies to realize that I'm tired. Mentally, physically, spiritually, I'm tired. I'm tired of the institutions. I'm tired of the systems of power. I'm tired of whiteness. I'm tired of police brutality. I'm tired of you as an ally coming to me with X, Y, and Z so I can refigure your Venn diagram of how you can put yourself on a pedestal while still keeping me at a lower point. I think allies need to understand that people who are part of the marginalized community do a service that goes unacknowledged every single day. As a Black, Afro-Latin, trans, non-binary, queer person, I walk out of my house hyper vigilant on a scale of 1,000%. I see a police officer, I am turning the block. I see a white person who looks like that has a Trump on the shirt or like, swastika, I'm going the other way. We consistently avoid trying to be put in positions that will do us harm. And I think allies don't understand that part of our living and our existence. When we say Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter, we're not just saying it so you can put it on Instagram and you can get likes. We're saying it because we are seeing numbers rise consistently every single day. And a lot of us keep up with that, and we end up getting, survivor's guilt because we're out here doing the work to try to save those like us. And in turn, you perform in a way where you think your dollars amount to the actual work that you could be embedding and unlearning the systems of power and the institutions and everything that is corrupt in this world. So I think for myself, I want allies to really understand that we're tired and there's not going to be any type of unrest for us until they stop trying to actively learn our story and just see what's actually going out there in the streets. It's painted for you on the news every day. Everyone shares it on Facebook. Everyone speaks about it. So stop being so blind to what's in front of you. And if you're going to act right and join us, do it and link your arm with me. And don't do it just so you can post about it later to get gratification.
So profound, Tygra, really. And when you say that, and when you talk about the allyship, do you feel that even within the queer community, so not to call out the white gay man on the call here, but do you feel that the parts of the queer community are not always allies to you as an African American within the queer community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The queer community, the LGBT community has derived their experience of how to navigate our queer community by looking at the cisnet hetero community. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how we modeled ourselves exactly right after that. And who's at the top of that pedestal? White men. Mm-hmm. And so in the queer community, when you see spaces or you see panels or you see conversations, who's leading them? White men. Mm-hmm. People who don't always, look like me. And that's supposed to be allyship because you went through your diversity checklist, you went through your inclusion checklist, and we have a Black person, so we're check. Oh, this Black person's also trans. Ooh, check. That sucks. Like, it sucks. Sorry, George. It sucks. And I've learned, it took me 10 years to really see that my community didn't reflect me, because there weren't always people like me speaking on things about me that are happening into my life. And yeah. So our community has a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. We still have a pushback with people still saying that Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera did not start the riots and that they're whitewashing that story when we all know what it is to be true. Mm-hmm. So until that stops, there can't be the actual diverse and inclusive collective pot that we want if we still separate it. There's the milk and then there's the cereal.
Thank you for that. And that was really the intention of this question, is to really show, because I imagine a lot of the people that are listening and then will watch this recording are within the queer community. And there's still a component of allyship within the community. It's not just straight cisgender people are supposed to be allies. There's levels of allyship. So thank you for that, Tygra. Yeah. George, now that we made you so awkward, I'm going to turn it to you. And I know that this question, this is coming from a different perspective for you.
Well, you did not make me awkward, but I'm always happy to be felt awkward. But yeah, so people always say LGBTQ community, but like, oh my gosh, that is so diverse, right? I mean, there is blatant sexism in our community. There's absolutely blatant racism in our community. There is a huge classism issue in our community. And there is a huge body image issue in our community that does not get talked about at all, or enough, I should say. And then we represent, like, every single culture on the planet has LGBTQ people in it, whether they want to admit to it or not. Like, we are everywhere. And so we are a hugely diverse group. And we all, well, I have a lot of learning to do. Our community has a lot of learning to do. And I think, remembering that when we use the word family or community, that's kind of how I try to approach things, is like, if something happens to the person next to me and they're queer, they're LGBTQ, that is my brother, my sister, my non-binary, my transgender sibling. And that's how I choose to react, is that it is family. But when you don't know the person personally, you just know that you have somewhat of a shared experience. It's complicated. And I think, 2-3 years ago, I was living in Seattle, and Black Lives Matter protested our Pride Parade, right? And like stopped the Pride Parade. And people freaked out. People lost their minds over that, And it was such an important event to happen, right? Because it really forced the Pride community to really the LGBT community in Seattle to sit down and really think, like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? I think a lot of times people think that because there's a shared experience of oppression, that people understand other people's oppression, which like couldn't be further from the truth. One person's oppression is not your oppression. You have to like be open and be mindful of other stories and experiences. But it's a daily effort, right? Like, it's constant working and learning and growing. And I think it's also about building opportunities. If you're a white cisgender gay man who has access and opportunity, it's really important to think about who you're lifting up in our community and who you're giving access to that power when you're in the room, right? So making sure that, with my work, like making sure that we are representing all genders in our facility, that we're providing healthcare access to all members of our community, to making sure that we have a robust program from the moment somebody enters a facility till they leave the facility, they felt respected no matter what, and that their needs were met. And what they came in there for were the needs that were met. And it's a lot of work, but it's so valuable, because it's beautiful to watch people succeed, and it's beautiful to watch people succeed who are from your family and share some of your shared experiences.
Thank you, George. I wrote it down. It stuck with me that you said, just because you have a shared experience of oppression doesn't mean you understand somebody else's oppression. I think that is so key for our listeners tonight. Pastor Yolanda, your thoughts on this one?
When I read this question, I was hesitant to even want to answer it, to be honest. I think of this kind of like my mama saying, don't air your dirty laundry. So I really struggled with this question, because it's like, of course, there is conflict in the LGBTQIA+ community. That is because we are human beings. And we are living within institutions and in societies and in communities with hierarchies, and the realities of isms and phobias that exist in the general population will of course exist within our own population. But because this workshop is about allyship, it's really hard for me to talk about this, knowing that, these are kind of conversations I like to have within our community,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily in front of and with other folks. So I'm just going to start there, that's really hard for me. But having said that, what I do feel comfortable saying is that the queer community is, the queer experience is the human experience. And the queer experience in the United States of America is the human experience in the United States of America. So as a female, sexism is real. And so it's going to be real everywhere in the United States of America. As a queer person, homophobia is real. It's going to be real everywhere in America. I have a trans son. Transphobia is real. And so it's going to be real within our community as well. And so, you know, I think that in discussing this, we can just discuss how it is that we can best support one another across the spectrum of our experiences. So I love what George said about your oppression's not my oppression, and my oppression's not your oppression. Absolutely correct. And we do have a common experience of knowing what it feels like to be oppressed, to be bullied, to be shamed, to be left out, to be forgotten, forsaken, you know, whatever. Even heterosexual white men may have been bullied at some point on the playground and know what that feels like. And so, you know, what I encourage people to do is to really empathize with the human experience, to understand that there are some common emotions that all humans experience, and that the more we put ourselves into our humanity, and the more we understand that no one is beyond that humanity, the more we emphasize that we all feel sorrow, we all feel grief, we all feel rage, we all feel betrayal. And then we attempt to create a beloved community where we feel those less often. So at my church, at Faith Lutheran Church, we don't say we're a safe church. We say we're a safer church. We're striving to be a safer church, because there's no such thing as a safe church, in my opinion. We have a long history of being abusive towards our community, towards the LGBT community. Long history. I'm a Lutheran. I'm a white, you know, like in a white denomination, 97% white. My denomination has a long history of. I can't say that I can be a safe church. I can only say I can be a safer church. And so I am really striving in answering this question to just say that we all have a responsibility, a profound responsibility, to try to create a safer, beloved community for all of God's children, with no exception. And so if we are doing anything that causes harm, we need to stop. We need to stop. And that is true in the heterosexual community. It's true in the queer community. It's true everywhere. And with that, I'll pass.
That was great, Pastor Yolanda. You might see me at church on Sunday because I can't get enough of you right now. Okay, so those were the 3 questions that we had put together for the panel. We do have one question in the Q&A. Before we get to that, I have my own Q&A question because it's come up a little bit and I want to clear it up for all of the attendees. We have said LGBTQ plus a lot, and then we have said queer at times. Can you guys tell us, you know, some people feel that using the word queer is now okay, and some people of the community are still offended by it. What do you think on somebody outside of the LGBTQ community using that term? Oh, go for it, Pastor Yolanda.
I just had this conversation with some of the elders in my church because they were bristling at my use of that word. And they said, when I was younger, that was a slur, kind of like the N-word. And so they don't want me to use that word. And for me, as a younger lesbian identified person, I feel like those of us who choose to use that word have reclaimed it out of the mouths of people who used it to systematically degrade and oppress us. And I take a lot of pride in using that word as a result, because I just feel like it does help give me a word for the broad diversity of our experience as LGBTQIA plus 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 plus, and that plus keeps getting bigger and bigger. I have queer kids, a generation under me, and they use all sorts of words on the back of that plus that I never dreamed of. And so sometimes I'm like, how many pluses can I say? Can we just all be queer? And so that's why I choose to say it. Having said that, I understand that there are some people, especially older people within our community, who don't like that word. And so what I feel is that we can name ourselves as we feel safe and comfortable. Do I think that allies and others should use that word? Probably not, because I think it's a pride issue that you don't have access to necessarily. And so and what could it hurt you guys to do a little extra work? LGBTQIA plus 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 plus. I earned the right to shorten it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I really love that.
So that's just kind of my feeling on this issue. and I will add that I celebrate anyone's right to name themselves and claim themselves and express themselves and show up for themselves however they want to show up for themselves and call themselves whatever they want to call themselves. And so if you want to call yourself something else, do that thing.
Thank you for that. George or Tygra, do you get, either of you have any thoughts on this one?
So I guess for me, like I'm from a different generation. I don't know. When I came up, the Black community was really using the word queer, of like, really showing love and visibility. And that's the way I came into knowing what queer was. And I would say that I use more of the LGBTQIA plus 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 when I'm talking to white cis people. I use it when I'm talking to white cis people. And then like queer is like that word that we use for like, like I said, like for love, for visibility as part of like a community. And I also think queer is an umbrella term, just like LGBTQIA plus 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 plus. But I would say like queer for me connects me to my Black and brown community, because that's where I learned what it meant. That's where I found my cis community. That's where the word developed my friendships, my networking, and who I am as a person, versus LGBTQIA as that not word, but has inducted me into white culture. and I use that in a more professional standard place. I use that as a connecting point so that white people can understand, like, I this is the word for the community, and this is the community right here. Here we have the lesbians, the gays, and you go down the line. So that's my on it.
I like that. Thank you. George?
Yeah, I agree. Like when I'm talking to my friends, I would never say LGBTQ community. We're always just queer that, queer this, queer that, But like if I'm typing a letter, it's gonna be LGBTQ, right? Yeah. And I like I also think of queer as also like a political mindset of maybe being a bit more liberal, maybe a little less heteronormative than people who identify as maybe like gay or lesbian specifically. But that's just like my own feeling on it. I don't know how other people feel on it. I will tell you that I personally bristle much more at the term homosexual than I bristle at queer. Like when somebody says homosexual, I'm like, where did you come from? Like, did you go back in
1982.
time? Yeah, like what happened? And so I'm like way more comfortable with the word queer than I am homosexual. I also think that when we do the like LGBTQIA plus, we're like taking our community and like really placing it out. And when we use queer, it just feels more like a hug to me. It feels more like we're all together, and it's talking about that shared experience. I will say sometimes when I do talks, medical talks, I'll use queer and I just see the room, like the heads pop up, you know, and then I remember, oh shoot, I'm not with family right now. I need to like break it down to LGBTQ. But yeah, that's sort of my thought process on it. But I think if it feels unnatural for you to say the word queer, don't say it. Like if it doesn't feel right to you, do not try it. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. That was my own personal Q&A, and you guys really taught me a lot. I like it. You're right, Pastor Yolanda. I've got the time to say all the initials. All right, Taryn, I will turn it over to you for the Q&A from the attendees.
I actually have my own personal question as well. And I'm sorry, George, but I'm leaving you out of this one. So Tygra and Pastor Yolanda, I would love to get your perspective on intersectionality between your race and also your membership in the LGBTQA plus community. How do you feel is the best way to be an ally, given that you have both of those? What's the best way for us to be supportive when we're trying to be supportive both of Black Lives Matter and also the LGBTQA plus community? You know, how does that intersectionality feel for you, and what sort of things help you feel supported given your intersectionality?
I'm so mad you did that. Intersectionality is really, I think people make intersectionality really, really hard to ground themselves into learning about themselves. And I'm only going to speak from my experience because I don't really have that much of a ground sound definition on intersectionality. But for me, when it comes to intersectionality, it's a way for you to really list how you show up to the party in your actions. So like, if we're going to base it off of, well, no, let me put it this way. In intersectionality, it kind of bases on how you show up first. So for me, how I present myself, what do you first see? What people first see? They normally see gender first. So that's usually how they're going to interact with me. Now that can also go into my race. And then we start getting on race and I'm, talking to an institution or we're getting into a system, then that can be about my demographic or where I came out, and then my education and then my wealth and so forth. But I don't have an actual wholesome answer for that because intersectionality is really hard and I'm still learning about intersectionality. And so I'm going to put that out there as well. As much as I'm learning about it, I just think it's kind of how you show it to the party and how you are visible to the world and how the world treats you based off what they see first. And for some people that is race, and for some people that is gender, and for some people that is sex. So, and then it goes into the aftermath of what comes next. Okay, Pastor Yolanda, you're up.
I kind of feel like this question is similar to the third one. So again, I feel hesitant to air dirty laundry. Having said that, when I think about intersectionality, I really think about Seneca Falls, when white women were working really hard to get the vote and to attain women's rights in the United States of America. And at that conference, there was a lot of conflict with Black women. And the most famous speech out of that, I believe, is Ain't I a Woman? Where, we had voices of Black women saying, my experience as an African derived woman in the United States is just as valid as your experience as a European derived woman in the United States. And you ought not just be agitating for white women's rights, you should be agitating for all women's rights. And you ought not leave me behind. And so that's how I often approach intersectionality. I am the embodiment of intersectionality, right? I define myself as female, Black, and queer. And then, there's lots of other intersections, and we're all at the crossroads of loads of identities, right? But what we know is that we can't separate that. So I'm not able to say, well, today I'll be a woman and tomorrow I'll be Black. If I run into a racist police officer, they're not going to care that I'm a woman. They're going to care that I'm Black. And so I don't get to separate my identities. I've got to show up, as Tygra said, in the room as my whole authentic self. And I encourage allies to show up in the room as your whole authentic self. And for us to see, again, back to this idea of the common human experience and narrative, and a commonality of shared emotion, oppression, experience, and to continually be looking for ways that we can work together to ensure all of our liberation, right? So you're only as free as everyone else is. You think you're free when I'm shackled, but you're not. And so your freedom is dependent on my freedom, and my freedom is dependent on your freedom. And so, I just preach this at church, that we are only doing as well as the least person, most marginalized person, most oppressed person in the community. That's how well we're doing. And so, we don't want to fall into this idea that, well, I'm good, so damn, sorry for you. We have to we all do better when we all do better, right? Wellstone. We all do better when we all do better. And so for me, that's what intersectionality is about.
Thank you to both of you. That was helpful to kind of put things in perspective, and I appreciate that. I have a question here from the chat, and it actually is something I identify with as well. So this person asks, when I interact with someone face to face, I don't necessarily feel the need to ask how they identify. Later, I realize that I might not necessarily know how to reference the conversation or person, either to someone else or for myself. Any thoughts or suggestions on how to handle that sort of situation?
Are they asking about pronouns?
I think so.
Is that what I'm getting? Is that what I'm getting? And I was like, well, okay. I think it's okay to ask at the beginning of the conversation. It's a great icebreaker, asking someone their pronouns. Or if just their name, if you just want to call them by their names. As much as I am very pronouns, I'm also a big advocate for just using someone's name at insert of pronouns if you don't know. If you know their names, that is the best way to possibly do that. But if you're in a conversation with someone and you can tell that you have probably messed up by calling them something that they're not wanting to, because we all have body language, we all have eyes, we all can see when someone's unraveling or unnerved in a conversation, just ask, That's been, I think George is like, don't assume, just ask, because there'll be a pleasant aftermath.
I'm curious what other people might think about this, but I have a really wonderful friend and colleague who posted on Facebook the other day saying, using they and them pronouns when somebody identifies as she or he pronouns, but using they or them as a convenience is still misgendering. And I'm curious, because I hear it in my work, somebody doesn't know someone's pronouns, they'll often move to they, them as like thinking it's like a neutral, like a safe pronoun land. But when my friend posted that, it really made me think about that quite deeply. And I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I know for me, before I started using they, them pronouns and I would get used and people would use they, them, I would feel like they were putting me in a box that I didn't ask to be put into, or they're lumping me with, you know, a group of people who, you know, I may be very close with, but that's just not how I identify. Identity is very tricky, because identity is the one thing that we have that, you know, doesn't really have a defense mechanism. You know, identity is just there. So like when we add pronouns into it, I think they, them, even though like, if you're talking in third person, and I don't want to say third person, but like, there's always that joke that, you know, straight people know how to use they, them when they're talking about someone that they didn't want their partner to know they were with. And that's not where where people sometimes don't want to be. They don't want to be like, well, you can talk about me, but just use the correct pronoun. I think that's my take on it. Like, you know, I just think that people should be validated in how they show up. And if they show up with she, her, or he, him, you should validate that if you have the chance of knowing it.
You know, my only thought about that is that one of the few things that we all for sure own, no matter how much money we have, power we have, etc., we have, is our own story and the right to name ourselves. And so I think it is such a beautiful thing to ask a person, what is your story? How do you name yourself? And, you know, particularly as an African American person, naming is essential to African peoples. Our names mean something. What we call ourselves it's who we are. And so, you know, it's so sad when we do misgender each other. And I mean, I still stumble over my Calvin's pronouns. You know, he's a transgender young man now, and hasn't been out long. And I love my son, and I never want to misgender him. And sometimes I still stumble. But what I know is that he has the right to name himself. And I want that for everyone. So I think absolutely that what Tygra said about there's no harm in asking. And in fact, it's a beautiful thing to say, I want to know you. I want to know your story. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I do want to say to the moderators that we ought not leave here without making sure to answer the anonymous person's question.
Yeah, yep, that'll be it.
It's been floating there for quite some time.
I thought I was the only person who saw that.
No, we were saving it for the end. Yeah, so let's get into that one. There is one question in the actual Q&A. It kind of hurts my heart to see it. Why should I come out? I see the negatives being greater than the positives. I'll go ahead and open it to that. It's like makes me actually want to cry for this person. I'll open it up to the moderators or to the panelists though to answer.
Coming out isn't easy, and it's a journey that when you take, sometimes you are going to be alone, and sometimes you are going to have the pillar of the community behind you full force. Every day is a battle. Every day is a drive to love yourself and to also love your community, depending on how you show up in that community. The negative does not outweigh the positive, because your life matters. No matter how you feel at this moment, someone is thankful that you are here. Someone is wishing the best for you. Someone is wanting the best for you, and someone is wanting you to succeed. And we've all been there. I can tell you that right now. I've been there as a struggling young gay Black man, as a struggling transgender woman, as a continued struggling non-binary human. And there are days that I would question my existence based off me coming out. If you know, maybe taking the other route and assimilating was the right choice for me. And when you assimilate, you do a disservice not only to your heart, but your spirit. Your spirit will start to crumble. You no longer value your own words, your own mind, your own body. And I want you to come out on your own terms, because it's only up to you to do it when it is necessary for you. And only you can take that journey. And I can't police anything in that. But I will say that I would rather you not do yourself a disservice to your identity and who you are as a person, to assimilate into a culture that does nothing but betray each other to get a good foot up on one another. You deserve better than that. You deserve love. You deserve a community that will fight for you and is there for you. And if you need someone to hold your hand through the process, you are free to talk to me, write me, text me, whatever. I am a message away. I will open that up to you, whoever you are. But I would hate for you to do a disservice to yourself when there is so much love and there's so much openness and so much community for you to be a part of and be embraced by those people.
That was really beautiful. Thank you
Mhm.
for saying that. That was beautiful. You know, I think fear is the main reason that we don't come out, right? We're afraid of how people that we love are going to react, and we're afraid of what our life's going to look like after, because it's really unknown. And each of our coming out experiences are unique and different, and the circumstances that we do come out in are unique and different. I can only speak for myself, and I can just say that being queer, being gay, is one of the things that I value the most about my existence. And I can only say that after coming out and making, you know, my adopted family of friends and community, which is such a value and a gift that LGBTQ people get to have in their lives, that I wouldn't trade being gay for anything. But I know that that's my experience. And I do just want to say to the person that, you know, if you are having a hard time, please know that there's definitely like the Trevor Project out there to reach out to help with coping with coming out, because it is one of the most pivotally big experiences that you'll have in your life. And there's also counseling services if you're in St. Cloud at Centric Care, that we specifically have LGBTQ counselors, you know, who have some of that shared experience to help guide you through the coming out process. And, you know, I think the other side is always a better place to be, and living your truth, as Tygra said, is one of the most magical things you can do for yourself and the people who love you. But yeah.
Just wanted to add that also, when you decide at any point to come out, you get to choose your family. You choose your circle. You choose, excuse me, you choose your network. You choose your community. You choose your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle. That is something you get to do. And as a queer person, stepping away from toxic, unnatural behavior is the best thing for you. And when you get around those people that you identify as your unit, so many things can happen.
Yes. Yeah, my heart just broke when I read this question. And so I'm just going to speak directly to this person from the depths of my heart. When I was coming out, I was married to a man. I had children with that man. I was a pastor and a respected clergywoman in the community. And when I came to the sudden realization that I could no longer live this lie, it rocked my entire world. And I remember going to the house of two beloved elder lesbian women and sitting at their table and weeping. And I told them, I am a Christian. I have been taught my entire life that it is an abomination to be queer. what am I going to do? I'm going to lose everything. And one of them leaned forward, and I'll never forget it. She said to me, the only abomination is to deny your creation. The only abomination is to deny your creation. And in that moment, I realized that God had created me beautifully, wonderfully, fearfully made in the image and likeness of God. And I was good. And it set me free. It set me whole free. And I created my life anew. And I created my family anew. And I had chosen family, as Tygra said. And I found people who would love and support and affirm me. And I didn't stay in abusive and toxic relationships where people didn't believe that my creation was glorious. And I learned to get up in the morning and look at myself in the mirror and be like, yeah! And so while we think it's going to be all negative, my family's going to forsake me, my church is going to forsake me, my community's going to forsake me, I'm going to lose everything. Actually, I gained the whole world. I am now married to the absolute love of my life and of my lives. If I get reborn, I'm looking for this woman. I am now pastoring a church where I can wear these glasses and preach. I mean, what in the world? And this goes back to you are only as free as you are free. And so whoever you are, honey, you deserve to be free. You are wonderful. You are beautiful. You are fantastic. You are glorious. And we need you. We need you just the way you are. And so I hope that you will find one of us. Tygra made the invitation. I'm making the invitation. I am Yolanda at Faith Lutheran Church in Becker, Minnesota. Find me. I will walk this out with you because you deserve that. And I will end by saying, you are not alone.
Absolutely.
We love you.
Absolutely. Okay. Yep, exactly, Tygra. Now, once I can talk again, I do just want to emphasize, if whoever did ask that question, the panelists are here for you. St. Cloud Pride is here for you. You can reach out to anybody for any further conversation. I think that was a great question to end on. It was we just had those two questions for our Q&A. I don't know if I can talk anymore because that one was, I mean, as the mother of a trans daughter, that would, I want to end by just saying thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us. The fact that you wanted to tune in to learn more about how to be a good ally means the world to all of us at St. Cloud Pride. I don't think I have enough words to express my personal thank you or the thank you on a part of St. Cloud Pride to each of our panelists. This was by far surpassed any expectation we had for the evening. This was one of the best conversations I've ever been involved in. And I just, from the bottom of my heart and from all of us at St. Cloud Pride, thank you, Tygra, thank you, Pastor Yolanda, and thank you, George, for joining us this evening. We appreciate you all. All right, thank you all out there. Everybody have a good evening.